Hello, welcome to my first YouTube video. I wanted to create a space on here to talk about books among other things, since reading has been a main and constant source of entertainment for me for so long. I remember as a kid, I was always picking up books, magazines, anything, short stories to read just to kill time. But it wasn't until when I was in 8th grade when I got my first Kindle, and that was what kickstarted my reading career, if you will, and also developed and nurtured this codependency really that I have between me and always needing to have a book in my hands. And today I want to talk about the top genre that I have been reading for the past decade, and it's romance. I first started with YA romance and Wattpad, which is, I feel like that was a lot of how we all started. So I would read books like The Fault in Our Stars, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, The Summer I Turned Pretty. Yeah, and then I transitioned from YA romance to just romance. In other words, smut. So I was reading authors like Elle Kennedy, Colleen Hoover, and many other romance authors. I also went through a phase where I was reading a lot of werewolf and the vampire smut, which was an interesting phase. But at the same time, I was also reading books like the Percy Jackson series, the Maze Runner series, Divergent, the Hunger Games, the Throne of Glass series. So yeah, if you were growing up during that era, you know that that was the best time to be a reader. So fast forward to now, according to my Goodreads, I've read over 600 books, and I'm pretty sure that more than half of that are romance novels. I truly was just reading romance novel after romance novel, and I was fine with that, you know. I truly had the best time reading about romance. With that being said, I do feel like in the last, let's say, 2 years, and specifically in the last few months, I feel like I have grown restless when I read romance these days, and it just doesn't hit the same. I don't enjoy it quite as much. And I think the most obvious reason for that is because I've read so much of it. It feels like I've just had my fill of reading romance books. And don't get me wrong, every now and then I'll read a romance book that I will just absolutely adore. It's show stopping, life changing, 10 out of 10. But that happens maybe once in every 5 to 6 books, which isn't a great ratio if you think about it. I wouldn't be as patient for other genres. I've read one and a half self help books to know that that wasn't for me, and I gave it up. But because I started with romance and it's my top genre to read, I was just way more lenient because like that's where I started, guys. I started with Haler fanfiction on Wattpad in middle school, and deep down in me, that is who I will remain. But moving to a more serious reason, I would say it's because in recent years, I've been getting my book recommendations, like romance book recommendations, on TikTok. It's safe to say that TikTok has really rebranded what books and what readers are now. It's just a cool phenomenon now to read. Like, it's such a relevant thing for people these days to be readers, and it's great, and I love it. It just creates a bigger community for people to talk about books of all genres. But I do feel like with the constant supply of book recommendations I do get from TikTok, it has been slightly overwhelming. And especially with the algorithm, if it notices that I am interested in a particular book, it will just keep giving me content of that book. So once I decided to read the book and once I finish it, it feels like I've already read it from TikTok. I know the scenes, I know the conflict, the resolution. So I'm just left with a sort of dissatisfaction. And it's not like the book itself isn't good, it's still good, but the reading experience isn't as enjoyable for me when I already knew what's gonna happen from TikTok. And I'm not blaming Book Talk, it's on me to keep looking at the content and spoiling things for myself. And I'm also not talking about the ending. Like, I've read hundreds of romance novels, and I can count on one hand and still have three fingers left where the main characters don't end up together because one of them is just. But yeah, so I know that they're gonna end up together, but I don't know if any of this makes sense. It's just, do you know what I mean? When you read a book and you're like, oh, I saw this already online, and it just doesn't hit the same as a reader. So now I know to scroll quickly past a book if I know that I'm gonna read it, so that the algorithm knows to like leave me alone and not keep suggesting more content. And I also want to clarify that I read conventional romance, where it's just two regular people living somewhat regular lives. I'm not reading dark romance or mafia romance where there are obvious trigger warnings that we all should know about before reading. And in that case, I agree, I too would want to know what to expect before reading it. And also with romance, there are a lot of tropes out there, but they more or less follow the same recipe where it's two people, and in my books, there are only two main characters falling in love. So yeah, it's two characters.
They meet and there's obviously some sort of tension, some chemistry, but for some reason, whether that be internal or external, they just can't be together. So they end up maybe breaking up or having a huge argument, and then they realize they can't live without each other and realize that, oh, their problems could just easily be resolved, and then they live happily ever after.
But yeah, and this is no hate to the romance genre or romance readers or book talk. This is just my personal experience just because I've read so much of it. And it's time to move on to.
The next chapter.
So, with all of that out of the way, this is just me taking a step back from the romance genre. I'm still gonna read it. If my favorite romance authors come out with a book like Emily Henry, Alicia Thompson, Ashley Poston, I will read it, but I also wouldn't actively seek new romance books out, you know? I want to redirect my focus to literary fiction, perhaps, and contemporary fiction. I've been reading a lot of that lately, and it's been invigorating. I find myself enjoying reading them now. I also want to give short story collections another go. I feel like I've had some bad experience reading short story collections before just because I didn't know it was a short story collection. So when you don't know going into a book that it's a short story collection, you just don't have a pleasant experience reading it. I also want to explore more of the nonfiction genre, like memoirs. As much as I've read in the past decade, it's a genre that I haven't really explored, so I'm really keen on introducing myself to that. So if you have any recommendations about all the genres that I've listed, please let me know by leaving it in the comments, even though I don't know how many people are gonna watch or comment. But yeah, so if you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. I apologize for yapping your ear off on my first video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!